Just something I wanted to briefly get off my chest. Over the past several months, I've seen an increase in attention and positivity towards the Sonic Adventure games, and subsequent demand for Sonic Team to either create a new game in a similar style or remake the games for modern day systems. I actually really like the duology myself, and I'd be interested in remakes or a third adventure game if I thought it looked promising. At the same time, there's a clear disparity between what a lot of fans think of the games and how critics view them nowadays, and the fans, understandably so, often mock the critics' opinions towards not just the Sonic Adventure games, but many 3D Sonic titles. One particular line that's often derided is, in case the title didn't give it away, the phrase, "Sonic had a rough transition to 3D. Or rocky transition in the battle regions. However, I find it odd that Sonic fans rebut this particular phrase since, at the risk of playing devil's advocate, it's one that I end up agreeing with. Don't worry, it's for reasons unrelated to Sonic Adventure's quality. Interest in a 3D Sonic platformer for Sega's flagship hardware stretches all the way back to the development of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, where lead programmer Yuji Naka wanted to take advantage of the upcoming SSP-1601 chip to create an isometric world for Sonic's next game. Due to the hardware not being ready for use by the time of Sonic 3's release, this didn't come to fruition, but it's worth noting just how early the plans for 3D Sonic's debut were, stretching all the way back to 1993. More intriguing though is that the idea of an isometric Sonic game would be the basis of a project that Sega later outsourced Traveler's Tales for. Here it is, Sonic's true 3D debut. You remember Sonic 3D Blast, right? Despite featuring ballerina twirling in one level, this was not a graceful entry into the third dimension. In stark contrast to Sonic Adventure, the game people seem to believe that Tribe Crave refers to, 3D Blast got relatively negative reception, much of the scorn stemming from the isometric gameplay and slippery controls. A few months prior, Super Mario 64 was released to much more favorable critical reception, and this was not preceded by any other notable attempts at a 3D Mario game. The only thing that comes to mind is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, another game that uses an isometric angle. This meant that Sonic's 3D debut was already behind Mario's in both timing and reception. Of course, I don't believe that 3D Blast was what Sega envisioned for 3D Sonic in the future, as a 3D Sonic game in a very different style was being developed at the same time. Easily the most notable cancelled Sonic game ever, Sonic Xtreme had a particularly messy development cycle. It all started with Yuji Naka expressing a lack of faith in the project, and things only went downhill from there. While the game could run fine on mid-90s PCs, it ran very poorly, like 3 frames per second poorly, on the Sega Saturn. In a sense, it was yet another instance where it seemed that the hardware just wasn't quite there yet. Not even additional help from a third-party team could alleviate the issue. If anything, Sega was even less impressed by their endeavors. After the project was essentially restarted from scratch multiple times, and one of the programmers caught pneumonia, the project was scrapped and replaced with a Saturn port of Sonic 3D Blast. This wasn't the end of it though. Due to the cancellation of X-treme, Sega worried about awareness of the Sonic brand since it had been years since the last mainline game, and now there wasn't one on the horizon for the Saturn. To put him back into the public eye and introduce new fans, they announced Project Sonic, referring to the games intended for release on the Sega Saturn. Phase 1 was Sonic Jam, a compilation of the Genesis games with added enhancements. More important to the topic of today's video, though, is the inclusion of Sonic World, a small 3D play area made from the earliest builds of Sonic Adventure, where Sonic could run around and find artwork, commercials, music, and manuals. This was neat and all, but it only served as a side mode and not the fully fleshed out 3D Sonic experience some were pining for. After finishing Sonic 3D Blast, Traveler's Tales began work on Phase 2 of Project Sonic, a racing game called Sonic R. While this game was fully 3D, it wasn't a mainline platformer, although there were platformer elements such as collectibles and the ability to jump. Moreover, it was very lacking in both content and control, leading to once again very mixed reception. It was about as much of Sonic's leap into 3D as Sonic the Fighters, a game I honestly forgot even existed while writing this script, was. Sonic R was released in late 1997, a full year before Sonic Adventure's Japanese release, and even longer before the more polished international release. Eventually, years after Mario's true leap into 3D, Sonic Adventure was released for a more powerful Dreamcast, and I won't try to deny that it was a big hit among the gaming press. It was the road to get there that was bumpy though. Between the release of Sonic & Knuckles and Sonic Adventure, Sega released 2 versions of an isometric game, an arcade-exclusive fighting game, a 3D side mode in a compilation, and a racing game. None of these were particularly well received, and none of these felt like a true 3D jump despite flirting with the idea. The one thing in that time period that perhaps could have been Sonic's true 3D debut went through development hell and was cancelled. Many other franchises only took one game to make this same leap. If all this doesn't imply that Sonic's entry into the third dimension wasn't smooth, I don't know what does. Now, maybe all this isn't what the critics are referring to when they mention Sonic's rough start in 3D. Maybe they do believe that the adventure games weren't even successful for their time, or that Sonic never truly had a good 3D game until Sonic Colors. If they truly believe that, then I await the day when I can give my take on that. For now though, I think I'll be taking a break from Sonic.